Board of Trustees, Tuesday, June 14th, work session to order. Macy, can you take the roll?
Oh my goodness. Trustee Blakemore. Here. Trustee Corvalon. Oh, excuse me, she's absent tonight. Then we have Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahone.
Here.
And Trustee Baumhover.
Here.
And let the record reflect that Trustee Corvalon is absent this evening.
Terrific. Thanks, Macy. The first item tonight is public comment on non-agenda items. Is anybody signed in for that? Okay, then let's put the call out to those who are on. Does anybody want to speak? Hearing none, we'll move on to section 4, informational items. We're going to go through 2 of those tonight, RTD Transit Police presentation, and then Boulder County Transportation Funding. And then we'll move on to action items. Is the team from RTD ready to go?
Yes, this is Sergeant Patrick Meester with the RTD Transit Police Division.
Excellent, thanks. Will you be alone or are there others joining?
Sir, I will be alone.
Okay, excellent. Go for it. Thank you. Thanks very much for connecting with us tonight.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I want to thank you for having me and letting me explain a little bit more about my agency and also answer any questions you may have. Did you receive a PowerPoint presentation from me?
We did. It's part of our pack. It's what made it was the heftiest thing in there.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to go through the PowerPoint with you. Remind me how much time I have now. That will depend on how in-depth I go with things.
What were you told, I guess, is a good place to start?
About a half an hour.
I think that's about right. Yeah, that should work. And if you run a little bit long, that'll be fine, but let's hit it.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so I'm Sergeant Patrick Meester with the RTD Transit Police Division. I head up our Community Outreach Impact Team. So I want to discuss a few things, and you can follow along with the PowerPoint. I will add some additional information to these slides as we go through, but I want to give a little overview of my agency, let you know kind of where we've been and where we are headed to, and I'd like to also get your input on how we can benefit your town. So I will start just as a brief history. RTD Transit Police Division was created in 2003. RTD is both a state and federal organization, and one of the federal requirements is that you are to have either a police division or a police department. Right now, RTD, we're a transit police division. We hope to change that as time moves along and as we grow to become a full-blown police department. So just a quick couple of notes. The jurisdiction for the RTD Transit Police Division encompasses 2,400 square miles. So any RTD property is our jurisdiction to include any of the vehicles. That may be any bus, that could be a light rail vehicle and or a commuter rail vehicle. All park and rides, train platforms, the Nederland park and ride up there would be our jurisdiction where we can take enforcement actions. Of that 2,400 square miles, we police in 8 counties. We encompass and police 44 cities. And we can enforce any criminal law or statute at a misdemeanor level in every city and county, with one caveat being in the city of Denver, with the exception of Union Station, we are not allowed to and or do not have the right to enforce any criminal statutes only in the city and county of Denver. The only agencies that can enforce in the city and county of Denver is going to be the Denver Police Department. The State Patrol can enforce on state grounds. We were allowed to enforce criminal statutes at Union Station when the All-Star game came last July, and we had finally got the chance to be able to enforce at Union Station, which we do a lot, and that is through the Denver Municipal Code. So that's a brief background of where our agency is at and what our jurisdiction encompasses. If you move along with the PowerPoint, page number 2 is our active division leadership team. We have an interim police chief. He's acting chief of police, Steve Martingano. We are in the process of gathering a new chief. Chief Steve Martingano is in that process as well. And then we have a Lieutenant Carl Ballard. He is in my unit as well, and he is the administrative lieutenant. We have a Michelle Lawrence, who is the manager of 911 operations, and then Israel Laufer is our manager of integrated systems. Just a background, we are a hybrid policing model. It's a dual security model. So we have certified transit police officers, which is what I am. It is a post-certified police officer that can carry out any police function that a standard officer would. And then we also have security guards. They work for Allied, and I'll go over what they do in just a bit. Little background information. In 2021, we received more than 66,000 calls for service on RTD property. So we're very busy. Our properties are very busy, and we have a lot of calls for service that we have to deal with. In preparing for this presentation, I looked up the calls that my agency has received for the Nederland town. And just to give you an idea, from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st of 2021, so year 2021, we responded to Nederland 14 times. From January 1st, 2022 to date, and I pulled these statistics, this is 2 days ago, we have had 10 responses to Nederland. Most of the responses are going to be to the Nederland Park and Ride that is up there, but there's also another bus stop that is our property that if there was a situation that needed to be taken care of, we would respond to that as well.
Quick question. We go by Netherland up here, but question on the 14, was somebody here already, or how did that happen?
So with those, it was parking complaints where we had a call for service and then the officer responded up there.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
You bet.
Sure.
And if at any point while I'm presenting, if you have any questions, go ahead and stop me and I can answer them right then and there, and then we'll move along, if that sounds good.
Could I ask just a quick question?
You
The RTD stop and ride at the Boulder Valley High School, is there an MOU between RTD, your police department, or division, and Boulder Valley, or who has jurisdiction?
So that's going to be Boulder Valley.
And then you guys respond when they request a call?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. So as we move forward, like I said, we have internal transit police officers. And just so you guys are aware, we have right now 14 active police officers, and they include corporals. So a corporal is a person that can also be a police officer. So our corporals include that number of 14 active police officers. Right now, we have 2 officers that are in the training portion in FTO, which is the field training portion of their hiring process. They will not be on the street as a fully functioning transit officer probably until the end of July. Then we will have 14. We're, of course, in the process of trying to hire more officers, and I'll go a little more in depth with that, with where we're going to go here in the future. This doesn't affect you, but we also contract secondary employment with police officers. And the main note there is going to be the Denver Police Department and the Aurora Police Department. These are officers that are working off duty for RTD, being paid by RTD to handle police service calls for RTD. And the reason we do that is we would pretty much be stuck in Denver or stuck in Aurora with all of our transit officers and not be able to leave and not be able to service the over 2,400 square miles that we need to get to. So without their help and support, we would not be able to ever make it up to your town to help you guys out with any issues that you may have. We also, I spoke about this earlier, we have armed transit security officers. Allied Universal is the company that we use. And we're supposed to have over 20, or 295 security officers for that. Again, manpower is an issue for Allied, so I cannot tell you for sure. They have 295 officers available to us. They work Union Station. They do respond to calls and mobile units, but they mostly will do a lot of our static positions. And then if you look, we also have Viper teams and TSA, which is the Department of Homeland Security, that will help with us mostly out at the airport. So that's a brief background of how the agency is made up. I did want to discuss a little bit about how our agency is deployed. So if you can scroll through, we restructured our deployment and patrol functions. This took place on April 3rd. Prior to April 3rd, we were a sector-based police response. So there are various districts and sectors of our territory. The territory is so wide-ranging that we would only have officers staffed in certain sectors. So it was very hard for us to respond to calls, especially if we were working up in the Boulder area and there was an incident that took place in Lone Tree. A lot of times it was hard for us to even get there. It wasn't a practical response. So April 3rd, we redeployed all of our resources, and we have redeployed them to 4 teams. We have a bus team, and the bus team are officers that deal with bus related issues. So, and this would be a team that your town would mostly have contact with. The team is made up of 4 officers to include those 2 corporals and a sergeant. They deal with anything bus related. And when I say bus related, if a crime happens on a bus, that is our jurisdiction. Because again, if it's an RTD vehicle, that's going to be our jurisdiction. They will deal with any parking issues, encampments, park and rides, bus stops, those types of things. And then we have a rail team. Now, the rail team is responsible for the rail vehicles, light rail vehicles, commuter rail vehicles, all of the parking structures with those and the platforms. That team is made up of 4 officers, with one of those officers being a corporal. I'll talk a little bit more in depth about this team a little bit later when I talk about our mental health and homeless outreach team. That team is made up of 4 officers right now, with one of those being a corporal. That team also has a supervisor, which is a sergeant. This team also is assigned right now 3 mental health clinicians. And the way the team breaks up, when each officer deploys, they are assigned a mental health clinician in their vehicle. The team will mostly work the Denver area to include Union Station, the 16th Street Mall, and the Civic Center, but they are also responsible for the Boulder Transit Center. And I bring that up to say that the team is allowed to go anywhere and take the clinicians anywhere they need to go. So if there was a need for a mental health clinician and or any kind of enforcement taking place up in your town, our mental health unit can go up there and participate and assist in any way they need. The mental health team is also a homeless outreach team. So if there are homeless issues, camping issues that are on any of the RTD properties, they would also be assigned to head up there and take care of those issues. I will say this: we're authorized 4 mental health clinicians. There are right now only 3. We're in the process of trying to hire another mental health clinician. And the way the teams are set up is it's more of a proactive response to policing. It's problem-oriented policing, which means we will investigate and detect what the issues are. And instead of just react to them, we're going to be deploying officers directly to any areas of need. And why I bring this up is you will see a shift. As we start to expand the agency, you will no longer see the security guards riding the trains, riding the buses, or being at a post at a park and ride. It's going to be transit police officers. Right now, we have the 12 officers, maybe 14 once they get out of training. The goal is this: within the next 3 years, to have 160 transit police officers, which will phase out the security officers, which in turn means you're going to see a sworn police officer riding that train, be it a commuter rail or a light rail vehicle, and or more importantly, which would affect you, riding the bus, which would be the Flatiron Flyer that will come up into your town. And just Since April 3rd, I've spoken with our bus team and I've been inquiring as to how that has worked out with them as far as when they're getting on the buses, when they're riding, what kind of activity they're seeing. And what they've told me is they're all bored because when they get on the buses, either people that are misbehaving immediately get off the bus, or if they're going to get on the bus and they see the officer, at that point they refuse to get on the bus. So when they are riding, it's already deterring a lot of criminal activity, which is what we want to absolutely do. So that is a little bit of how our teams break down. Again, the last team I'll touch on a little bit is our community engagement team. That team is made up of myself and Lieutenant Ballard. My main responsibilities are reaching out to our stakeholders to introduce the agency, explain a little bit about what we are about, and then to come up with and determine ways on how we can assist your town and or any of police agencies, chambers of commerce, whatever it would be, to be a contact point and to see how that we can assist in any way we can. In all of the meetings that I've done and presentations, I provide my information as the main contact point at RTD. Say, for example, your town has a certain issue, and instead of have to deal with calling RTD and trying to get connected to the right person, you would contact me. And instead of you doing that investigation and spending time on the phone, I would do that for you. Any questions you may have, any assistance you would need, I would coordinate that and or look up the answers to any questions and make sure I follow up with you to answer your questions and help deploy our teams, all four of them, deploy those resources to handle any issues. So we also will partner with a lot of events. We do a lot of safety presentations, answer questions about RTD safety and or services. That's the main goals of the community outreach team. And again, next, the timeline, this took place April 3rd, and that is our deployment as we speak. Just a quick note, we do have a canine unit, okay? They are explosive detection animals. We have two of them. One is Max and one is Thor. They're a valuable resource for us. For example, if there was a suspicious package left on the park and ride up there, or if there was thought that it might be bomb related, our dogs would go up there and run the suspicious package to make sure that it is safe, and or if there were determined that it was not a bomb. We deploy at all of our properties, and our canine unit also assists other police agencies. In the town of Longmont, for example, there was a homicide and they could not locate one of the shell casings from the shooting, and Max, one of our canines, was able to deploy up there and found that shell casing for evidentiary purposes. So we are more than happy to call out the canines if they're not working, or if they're on working, if your police agency needs a canine that is needed for bomb detection and or article location. We're more than happy to make that happen and get those dogs up there to you. You would need to contact our dispatch, and then we would start to coordinate that with the canine sergeant.
Sergeant, how,
Yes.
we're kind of at the end of the line here. If we needed that kind of help, how long would it take?
So it could take a while. You would, if they're on duty and they're up in the Boulder area, it would be drive time. The team's schedules will vary just because they have to, they're scheduled to deal with specific problems. So I can't tell you their exact dates and times when they're working because the schedules are generated when their problems are occurring. I know that our canines, Max, for example, he would be deploying if he was not on duty. He would be deploying from the, let's see here, the Thornton area, and Thor, our other one, would be deploying from Firestone. They have take-home canine cars, so they would hop in the cars right then and there, all their gears with them, and they would head directly out. Usually it's going to be the canine that's on call, but they're both really good about if one is busy or we can't get in touch with one for some reason, the other canine will step up and deploy. So they'll be deploying from their residence, which is to the north, which would be a little bit of an easier response. If, for example, they live down in Lone Tree, then it would take that much longer. The on-call process is very quick. We would contact the on-call canine sergeant, and then he would contact the canine and have them deploy. And again, they would deploy from their house. We had just as a note, we had a shooting on a North Glen platform. we thought there might be an outstanding shell casing, and I was able to get on scene, contact the canine officer immediately, and he was already suited up and starting to head our way. Would have been there within 15 minutes to the Northwind Park and Ride. Fortunately for us, we found out that the suspect had a revolver, and when you shoot a revolver, you don't expel a shell casing, so we did not need to have the canine deploy. But then he shut it down, but it would have been a pretty quick response. So time-wise, I think we could probably get him there in a half hour if you needed to pin me down on a time. Of course, we would lock the scene down and then secure the area, and then the canine, when they arrived, would be able to conduct their searches if they needed to. Again, you could contact other police agencies that have bomb detection canine dogs if you needed. Just so you're aware, our canine dogs are not bite dogs, so they will not search for they will not track people. They don't clear buildings, and they do not bite. They're mostly for article recovery and bomb detection. Any other questions on our canines?
Not on the canines, but it looks like, did I hear you say the allied officer that I guess works the Boulder terminal will be replaced with a uniformed RTD officer?
So with that, that'll be a decision that's going to be made at some point. We will always use allied in some capacity for our stagnant posts. For example, down at the Blake office, in certain areas, you will have an allied officer that is going to be at that post. The Boulder Transit Center is a very busy transit center for us. I could see that one being changed out with a sworn police officer at a stagnant post. That'll depend on the criminal activity and overall activity at a certain location. So allied will always be a part of our model, but they will be drastically reduced.
Okay, excellent. And the homeless, the people that work with the homeless, they're uniformed officers, right?
They are, yes. So yeah, our mental health impact team and homeless outreach team, yep, they are uniformed officers, and they also, along with working with the mental health co-responders, are going to take any enforcement action that any of the other teams would take. So they're able to write summonses, tickets, take people into custody. They do everything that all of the other officers do. They just have the added bonus of having that mental health co-responder with them. But again, one of their main responsibilities is to make sure that the co-responder is kept safe. So usually the officer will contact the person in need first, make sure that they are safe. For example, there's no weapons there, in a frame of mind where they can have a conversation. Once they make sure that the person is safe and the scene is safe, at that point, the co-responder will take over the entire contact. Unless it gets to the point where it becomes unsafe, then the officer will take over.
Okay, great.
And I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but the homeless outreach team is also responsible for dealing with encampments. So their job is to go out. If we get reports of an encampment, they're going to go out there, and they're also going to deal with it.
Do the encampments happen sometimes on RTD property? I presume you're limited to RTD property, right?
That is correct. Yeah. So the encampments that we will be dealing with are going to have to be on RTD property. Now, having said that, we have a homeless outreach coordinator that RTD has hired, and he works with the homeless communities. And what he will do is go out, and oftentimes with these large encampments, he will go out and try to offer services, provide toiletries and care bags, and try to let them know that at some point the encampment's going to have to be removed, and try to get them into services. He will go on properties that are not RTD related, but our homeless outreach team and myself have went out and assisted him with these encampments. Usually it's got to be somewhat close to RTD property. For example, there was an encampment down at Hamden and I-25. It was not technically on RTD property, but I went out there and provided scene security for him, as he had contacted the group to let them know that CDOT was going to be removing the camp at some point, and trying to get them some options for services and get that ball rolling before CDOT showed up. And he also went out with care packages and those things. So it doesn't have to necessarily be on RTD property. We really try to work with him and provide him any assistance that he needs, but it's probably going to have to be somewhat related to an RTD property, but not exactly on the property, if that makes sense.
It does. Thanks.
Absolutely. So we also talked about our Homeland Security, TSA, and Viper teams. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Again, with the mental health clinicians, it's a 50% grant funded program. And again, they focus on recovery, resilience, treatment, and referrals. And these folks do a great job for us. People in crisis, when they're in contact with them right then and there, they can coordinate getting them into walk-in clinics, getting them hooked up with social services, find ways for them to locate their birth certificate, because it's very hard to get into social services without a birth certificate. They can help facilitate that, as well as get them some photo ID, which is a huge thing. So our mental health clinicians are a super benefit for our agency to have, which is rare for a lot of police agencies. As you go through the PowerPoint there, there's a whole bunch of mental health encounter outcomes. I won't go over all those with you, but if it's interesting reading for you to be able to see those. We also talked about our homeless task force and outreach efforts. Mid-2019, the task force was assembled, and there's a number of partners and agencies that RTD works with in that task force, to include the Harm Reduction Center, the Denver Rescue Mission, Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, the Denver Public Library, which helps with us down at Union Station to try to adjudicate criminal charges with folks through the Denver Municipal Courts. Also will help them get their birth certificates, and other agencies. So they work well with us. And just as a note, you will want to know that we have two dispatches. We have a Transit Police Communication Dispatch number 1 and a Transit Police Communication Dispatch 2. All of the activity that is north of I-70 is going to be handled by the Transit Police Communication Dispatch 2. And there are 2 different phone numbers for that. Those phone numbers should be on the PowerPoint. If not, I can get you the main number that you will need to have. Again, they handle about 66 annual reportable incidences. They have a Transit Watch hotline, text messaging, and email support that they all will monitor and send officers out when needs arise. We also have a Transit Watch app that can be downloaded for your iPhone and your Droid. This is a great app because if a person needs to make a phone call and report criminal activity or suspicious activity, individuals might not be comfortable getting on the phone and talking out loud to a dispatcher. With the Transit Watch app, when that's downloaded, it's basically a texting app where they can text exactly what's taking place. It'll go directly to our dispatch. They will dispatch out transit police officers to deal with the situation, or they will also dispatch the district officers. And when I say district, I mean that is your home police department, because they may be closest to the situation where a quicker response is needed. One of the things my unit does is when we go out and attend these events, we have all this information to include how you would download the Transit Watch app to your phone and explain a little bit about what it does. And more importantly, we will educate a person on how they are going to be a good reporting party and or a witness, and what things to look for and to report. And our dispatch is able to go through and monitor all those apps, as well as our dispatch does live CCTV monitoring. RTD has over 10,000 video investigations annually. Basically, if you're on a lot of RTD property, you are going to be on camera, to include any light rail vehicle, any commuter rail vehicle, and any bus. The light rail vehicles and the commuter rail vehicles are being watched in time by our dispatch. The buses are not. The buses are recording the information, and to get that information, it would have to be docked at a station and downloaded. The operators would dock the bus, and then our video investigations unit, which is basically our version of detectives or investigators, they would conduct the video investigation. We'll move on to the video investigations. They're attached to the Law Enforcement Bureau. They work with internal and external crimes. So they deal with a lot of internal RTD issues, but they will also work on criminal investigations for not only the RTD Transit Police, but they work with other police agencies to get them the video access that they need. They will watch all the videos and they will write a detailed report minute by minute on what is taking place. So the video and that report will be turned over to the home district agency.
Sure. And then
Yes.
our buses are in the canyon for significant part of the time. Do they have communications?
They do, yes. So we'll talk about the Flatiron Flyer. Your cameras are not, they don't go out.
Excuse me.
Yes.
It's the NB bus.
Oh, the NB bus. Okay. Um, Yes, any bus that's RTD related is going to have those cameras. The coverage is not going to go out. It won't be available until the bus is docked, and it will only last for until it gets wiped for 3 days. So if an incident takes place and it's serious, you would want to contact our agency as soon as possible so we could get the bus docked and that video downloaded. Where it would become a problem is in cold investigations, where after a certain point, which is going to be 3 days, the tape will be cleaned and it'll move on to new video recordings.
Okay, good.
And, yes, go ahead.
Whoever has trouble on the NB, for instance, does he have audio communications? Does he have the ability to reach a dispatcher?
Yes, that's a great point. I'll bring that up. We actually have 3 dispatches. So we have our both transit police communication dispatches, but also we have a bus dispatch. So there are times, and this usually will happen with buses, the bus operator is going to call in to bus dispatch, and bus dispatch will then relay the information to the appropriate transit police communications center for RTD and also for whatever, excuse me, district law enforcement entity is servicing that area where the incident's taking place. So we do have a bus dispatch. The operators can also call 911. If they would make a 911 call, that would go directly to the closest police agency. They also have the option to call our transit police communication as well. And we do receive calls through all three types of notification systems.
Good.
And just, there are also panic buttons
Yeah,
on the buses where if they push that button, it's going to open up a mic. So dispatch will be able to hear exactly what's happening. And of course, the video is being recorded, but dispatch won't be able to see what's taking place, but they're going to be able to hear exactly what's happened. And I've been on calls where the operator did push the button and dispatch was updating me as I was en route to the call on exactly what was happening. So that is another option that our operators do have.
excellent. And then your dispatchers, I would imagine, are plugged into county medical and police and fire.
Correct. So our dispatch is absolutely plugged into all that. They are 911 certified for law enforcement and EMS operations. Of course, they're public safety dispatchers. They will contact medical. They will contact the fire department if there would be a fire that was on a property or affecting a vehicle. And of course, they also mostly contact district agencies where they will contact the appropriate jurisdiction where the incident's taking place and get them dispatched as soon as possible.
Terrific. Okay.
And then I guess as we go through the PowerPoint here, we just have the Transit Watch applications that I've already talked about. People can call 911, they can text, they can email, and they can chat. And then again, the big one for us that we're trying to increase people's usage of is downloading and using the Transit Watch app to report criminal activity and or suspicious activity. So that in a shell is a little bit about my agency. I know I'm talking fast, but there's a lot to cover there in a half an hour. And I wanted to give you guys plenty of time to ask some questions.
Thank you, Sergeant Meester. Board, do you have questions?
There's just one question with the homeless outreach coordinator. I noticed you had partnerships with Denver County, Jefferson County, but lacked any partnerships with Boulder County, as well as potentially reaching out to NICH, which is Netherland Interagency Council on Homeless Encampments. So I was curious, why is there not an established partnership with Boulder County and Boulder County Mental Health when you operate in their county as well?
That hasn't been done yet, and that's a part of my assignment is to start to reach out to Boulder County and counties where we don't have any contact yet, introduce ourselves, and then try to facilitate those relationships so that we can become more active up in Boulder County.
Sweet. I was just curious. I love what you guys are doing. I think it's awesome. You have the outreach for the homeless encampment as well as the mental health coordinators. I would definitely suggest you reach out to NICH here in Nederland and coordinate with those folks. They tend to have kind of the lowdown on a lot of what's happening with our homeless and, I guess for lack of a better word, unhoused population.
Okay, sir. And can you, this is exactly why I want to be meeting with folks and discussing these things so I can get this information. Can you spell that for me, just so I make sure I'm getting the right information so I don't contact the wrong people?
Niche, I believe it's capital Niche. It's an acronym.
Okay, perfect.
If you look that up with Netherland, you should be able to find the contact information, the website. They're a nonprofit and they are housed under the Intermountain Agency Youth and Health and Human Services Alliance, I believe. So some other folks that would be great for you to connect with. They're kind of the umbrella organization across the peak to peak that has all the contact information for the various different agencies and nonprofits that help our small mountain community kind of facilitate all of these different programs.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, sir.
I don't know if folks have access to the chat, but I put that information in the chat along with a link to their website.
Thank you.
Sergeant Meester,
Yes.
I heard you say you responded to 14 calls in Nederland in 2021.
Yes.
And I think I heard you say that you responded to 10 calls in Nederland in 2022. Is that correct? Did I hear that right?
That's correct. And just so I can clarify, when we say respond to calls, that could be a call for service, or it could be an officer initiated call where an officer decides to deploy up to your town and patrol. So with our new deployment, we're trying to get our officers out to a lot of the out areas that are a little bit further away from the Denver area and trying to be more proactive. So you see already we have 10 calls and or proactive responses. And that's what we're trying to do, is to get out to all of our properties more frequently and not just stay in the Denver area.
Okay, great. Thanks for answering that. And I'm also just want to clarify that there's portions of 119 driving through the canyon where there's no cell phone service. And so does the MB bus have a way to make a call without cell phone service?
I would have to look that answer up, and I can absolutely find that out and get that information for you.
Great. It's about
Thank you.
22 minutes of downtime.
Wow. Okay.
So there, during the winter, it's not uncommon for the bus to get stuck in the canyon. And people have ended up walking several miles home in blizzard kind of conditions. So yeah, I'm just curious about the communication in the canyon when the bus is having difficulty. Thank you.
Oh, very good. And I will look into that. And excellent. I can get those answers to those questions, and then I will get those responses back to you.
Thank you, Sergeant. Any other questions before we close this portion out?
Yes, for those of us who cannot see the video, do you have the phone numbers for the dispatchers that you could orally give to us?
Yes, I can. When you're ready, I will start with the main dispatch that you guys will want to contact whenever you're ready.
Ready.
303-299-2929. And that would be the dispatch that you would want to call if you are north of I-70. There's a different number for the dispatch that is south of I-70. I can give that to you as well.
Okay, go ahead.
So that one's going to again be 303-299 and then 2911.
Okay.
And again, those numbers go directly into to our dispatch that are manned by our dispatch operators. So you could call that, and that would be like a 911 to us. You can report emergency situations to our dispatch and or non-emergency situations via those phone numbers.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Sergeant Meester.
We appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And if you ever have any questions or concerns, you can reach out to me, and I can be able to handle any issues that may come up and or answer questions or find out the answers to those.
One last question. How big is your
Yes.
budget with a staff this big?
Sir, that I don't know what the budget is. So
Okay, fair enough. Alrighty, thanks for your time this evening. We appreciate the outreach here at the end of the line.
you're very good. Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thanks for your time tonight.
See ya.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so moving on to our next informational item, we have Boulder County Transportation, who will be presenting about Boulder County Transportation funding, specifically the county sales tax. And I do see Kathleen, Tim, and Stacy on the line, but I'm not sure who will be presenting this evening.
Great. Good evening. Thank you so much for having us this evening. I'm Kathleen Brackey with Boulder County, and with me is Stacy Proctor and Tim Swope. We really appreciate being able to share an update with you on Boulder County transportation funding. We do have a video to share, and wondering if that would work so that we could see the slides or others could see the slides, what your preference would be.
In our hybrid setup, we don't have the ability to share our screen. So I do believe we have a presentation from you in the packet. And what we did for the last presentation is just scrolled through our packet and kept along. So I'm going to suggest that we do that for this presentation.
Agreed.
Okay,
Yep.
great. We also have a video to share, but maybe what we could do is just put the link to the video in the chat, and people can watch that at their convenience. Would that be the easiest way to do that?
Yep, let's do it. Let's do that.
Okay, perfect. Well, then I have the packet open on page 35, just kind of the start of our slides, and I'll try to make reference to the slides as we go, as I speak through them. That's okay?
Yep,
Oh,
we'll follow along.
okay, perfect. All right, so moving on to page 36 then of the packet, the agenda. These are the items we were hoping to cover with you this evening. And I'll just go briefly through the slides and would like to leave plenty of time for discussion and questions from all of you. And so I'm just going to jump right in. This is the slide where page 37 is where we normally show the video, but really the context here is just that all of the transportation projects and programs and services that we're all working on together today, as well as into the future, are based on Boulder County's transportation plan that was most recently updated in 2020. So when you have a chance to check out the video, it helps to show kind of the breadth of the different types of transportation projects we're referencing, and most importantly, who we're trying to serve. We're really trying to serve people who live across Boulder County and all the communities in your community, as well as all the others, and providing those connections for people of all ages and all abilities in between. So I'm going to move on to page 38 and just touch briefly on Boulder County's role in transportation. Often we spend time talking about the new projects or projects we're working on going forward, but it's also important to talk about the fact that so much of Boulder County's transportation system is taking care of the existing system and making sure that we have the resources through ongoing funding sources like property taxes or vehicle registration fees, gasoline taxes, those sources of funding to help maintain the basic operations and maintenance of the countywide transportation system, and in particular the roadways in unincorporated Boulder County. In particular, what we'd like to talk with you about this evening is one of the Boulder County funding sources, and it's one of our primary ones. I call our bread and butter funding for multimodal transportation, and that's the existing county transportation sales tax. It's a 0.1% or a tenth of a penny is our current sales tax level, and that's been in place for approximately 20 years. And that funding has gone to create a lot of different types of transportation investments over the years. So these photos here on page 38 help illustrate some of the examples, again, in terms of the roadway side of things and transit and regional trails and shoulder widening projects. But I'm going to move on to page 39 of the packet, which is, I think, a really helpful look back over the past 20 years of how the transportation sales tax dollars have been put to use. And when we look at, again, at a countywide view, there's really a tremendous amount of roadway projects and shoulder widenings, intersection improvements, regional trails, transit services and partnerships and programs, as well as safety improvements for people walking and biking. So we take the accountability of these funds very seriously, and tracking those dollars, reporting out through the consortium of cities every year. It's really important that we have that accountability and transparency of how we're deploying the dollars over the years, and certainly want to continue that going forward.
One thing I noticed, there's no Netherland on here. Have you done projects up here?
Yes, there actually are. I think I was just looking at that. There's I don't know if I can zoom in on this or make it bigger. I'll just probably mess up the formatting. There are projects actually in Nederland. There's like a green line that goes off the page, and that's something we should probably address, that there's definitely projects in the mountain communities and in Nederland in particular. Tim, I don't know if you want to speak to that. You have a long history of all the projects that have been done.
Yeah, as far as the existing sales tax, it started in 2020 and it started in 2001 and renewed in 2007. Most of our work with the town has been on transit support and helping with the N. We've also been working with the town for quite a long ways while trying to get either a soft surface or a hard surface trail up along County Road 130 up to Nederland. I think it's the middle high school or the high school.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been our focus. I mean, truthfully, the 2007 ballot issue was very focused on sort of bicycle connections, and did not have a whole lot in the mountains. Boulder County Public Works does spend a lot of money on transportation in the mountain areas. For this one, the list of projects we are looking at some mountain road improvements, helping rebuilding the Eldora ski road, which is in bad shape. But in general, we're working with the different communities to try to find projects that meet the goals of the sales tax and also are needed by the communities that we serve.
And we have some slides coming up on some of the examples going forward I can share as well.
So just to jump in here about the County Road 130 trail, that's still of interest to the community. I've heard from folks here that they would like to have that trail in place. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. All right, I'm just taking some notes here.
Back to you, your floor.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'll move along through the packet to page 40, and really why we're having the conversation with all of the local communities across Boulder County, and why now is because this funding is so critical in order to be able to, again, advance the projects from the Boulder County Transportation Master Plan. And in particular, this funding source is set to expire in mid-2024. And so we need to be looking ahead in terms of how do we identify opportunities to extend the countywide sales tax for transportation, and get ahead of that, either with a question that goes on the ballot this fall or next year. But our hope is it's this year. Just recognizing that, again, this funding is really our basic foundational funding for transportation services, like our transit programs. And I know we work closely with you and your community on transit, and transit pass programs, and how to link together and enhance transit opportunities for the Nederland community, like this summer, starting the fare-free service on the NB between Boulder and Nederland on the days that the Hesse shuttle is running, so that we can hopefully give people more options to come to Nederland without having to drive, and understanding the parking impacts and things like that on the community. So just an example. But, you know, when we start looking out ahead, it feels like 2024 is, for me, is tomorrow. And so how do we, you know, work on this now so that we can have continuous, reliable, sustainable funding for transportation for the next 15 years beyond 2024. The other reason that now is so important is that for the first time, truly in decades, there is actually new money available for grants through the state of Colorado, through Senate Bill 260, and also through federal funding through the federal infrastructure bill. We have not seen money like this in transportation for probably over 30 years, which is fantastic and is a huge opportunity. And some of that funding will flow through the Denver Regional Council of Governments through grant programs like the Transportation Improvement Program that's open right now. Which is great to have all that new money flowing into transportation. But as we know, in order to access any of that money, we have to be able to provide local matching dollars. And the local match can be anywhere from a standard 20% up to, you know, 40 or 50%, depending on the level of competitiveness of those different grant applications. So we want to make sure that we can leverage these Boulder County sales tax dollars and be able to stretch them as far as possible so that we could go after those new funding sources that are available at this point in time. And then I also think it's important to say what happens if this doesn't go forward. Either the commissioners decide to not put it on the ballot, or it goes forward to the ballot and the voters don't say, enough voters say yes. It really will be a tremendous impact for Boulder County. So this is the funding, again, that we use to provide transit services, our regional trails, our mobility for all programs for vulnerable populations. And basically, without this funding, we would be just focusing on operations and maintenance of the existing transportation system.
Well, as I noticed, I see the mobility programs in here. Do they extend to Netherland? Do VIA vans come up here?
Yes, and actually through Boulder County, one of the programs in our department for transportation planning is the county's Mobility for All program, and that's managed by Angel Bond. And then we also have youth transportation programs as part of that as well. And we just are creating the Boulder County's first ever coordinated human services plan, and that has specific mobility programs included for mountain area communities, including volunteer driver programs and other types of access and mobility services. And I can talk more about that in a moment too.
Great.
Okay, I'm going to skip now to page 41. And because again, it's kind of teeing this up, a great conversation. What are the types of projects, programs, and services that this funding will accomplish if we're able to have a sales tax extension? Again, we will be able to continue our roadway projects to improve safety and resilience. So this is the example of the shoulder widening project. Again, our mobility for all programs, we recognize that throughout Boulder County, we have an aging population and we have growing numbers of vulnerable populations. And so how are we going to grow service delivery for them? And then our different types of transit service, you know, this is the example from Lafayette, but as you know, we also provide recreational shuttles. We're just starting a new transit service between Lyons and Boulder called the Lyons Flyer. So we're always looking for opportunities and partnerships with communities to expand and grow the Boulder County transit services, and to do those and deploy those in a way that's complementary to the services that RTD is providing and that local communities are providing. And then we've talked a little bit about the regional trails. We want to be able to, we have a countywide trails master plan, and we want to make sure we can continue to deliver those connections throughout the communities. And then our regional corridors like Colorado 119, US 287, Colorado 7, and those. So that we're really trying to create a network of options for people throughout the county.
Great.
Oh, was there a question? So maybe this slide helps a little bit to answer the question about the what we mean by our mobility and access programs for vulnerable and underserved populations. So again, our new coordinated human services plan is called Mobility and Access for All Ages and Abilities, and it includes past programs, travel training, safe routes to school types of initiatives, as well as education and outreach programs. And we do have specific mountain area programs included in there as well.
Could you elaborate on the mountain programs in that area?
Sure. So one of the programs is the Mountain Area Volunteer Driver Program that Angel Bond is leading, and that's working with community members and community organizations to find and train local residents who want to serve as drivers and create trips for connections to within the community and beyond, depending on the services that people are seeking. So that's, I know, is currently underway. And I can look up some of these and put the links in the chat if that would be helpful as well. I might not get all the right terminology there, but I'd be glad to provide more information on those specifics.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
There's also a wealth of information with the peak-to-peak housing, health, and human services
Yes.
board community, and they work very closely with Mobility for All and other folks like that. So I think that's a great place to go for more info too.
Kathleen, I just wanted to add one thing too, is I think that the Mobility and Access for All document that Angel and Cami have been planning, I think, to reach out to different communities to come and do a presentation about what was in that report. So so we can definitely have someone come and give like a specific update on what was in that report.
Yeah, that's a really great reminder. Thank you, Stacy. I just put the link to the document in the chat. Hopefully that worked. And you're exactly right. So if you all would be interested in more detail on the mobility programs, I'd be glad to connect you with Angel Bond, and I'm sure she'd be glad to give a presentation.
I think we would. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, glad to do that. Okay, and then in terms of what we're referring to in terms of the roadway safety and resilience projects, again, these are just some images of the types of projects for improving safety, improving, maybe bridges and culverts, and the mountain road repair. And I don't know, Tim, if you want to speak to this in more detail about the Eldora ski road reconstruction.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot more detail other than that road. We've been running into problems for a while, both just with its situation on the hillside, with the overall drainage challenges we've been having there. And it's just above and beyond what we can really do with our general, with our typical road and bridge funding. So it would be the type of project that we would look at as an improvement. And something that's needed just to simply maintain that road, but also like all of our sales tax projects, there'd be some substantial improvements as far as safety, as far as its ability to handle snow and water, and just also more space for vehicles and bicycles. We wouldn't really widen the road, but we would certainly upgrade all the needs it has, which are fairly substantial given its location and high use during the winter months.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I'll move on here too, and please, again, I thank you for asking questions as we go along. These are some examples of the regional trails. Again, opportunities for community connections, both hard surface as well as soft surface trails. And I'm going to keep going here. And then again, on our transit services and programs, and again, ways that we can continue to support our recreational shuttles, fixed route services like the Climb, and then on-demand services like we have in currently in Lafayette, looking to expand that, and then examples of interregional service like the Flex, which connects from Fort Collins, Loveland, Longmont, and Boulder, and then ongoing partnerships with other transit service providers, including RTD, and finding ways where we can help and enhance each other and grow transit opportunities. We've pitched an idea, for example, to RTD that if there were additional dollars available, what if Boulder County were able to help run the NB and run it more frequently between Nederland and Boulder? And then that could potentially free up resources for RTD. I mean, we're open to any and all creative ideas in terms of how we can enhance and grow service through what Boulder County can do directly, or what we could do through additional partnerships with others.
So yeah, the NB is very popular and has a good number of riders on it, people going to school, going to work, coming up here to recreate. And so, and the Eco Pass is very popular too. So I think those kind of enhancements on the NB bus would be supported up here.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful to hear, and I just think it's fantastic that the Nederland community has the community-wide Eco Pass. So again, how can we work together to enhance the usefulness, right, of the pass, so that people have access to more options and more services with that. So yeah, definitely open to ideas there. Another recent example that came up about transit was Boulder County was asked to support the town of Nederland's application for, I guess, a peak-to-peak planning study for around transit. We were glad to do that and help provide some of the cost sharing on the local matching dollars. So again, anything we can do to help support transit in your community or connecting, across the region, we'll be glad to do that.
Yeah, that still comes up as an interest in the community, to have transit along peak to peak, because we are, we're a small town, just a square mile and a half and 1,500 residents, but then there's another 3,000 or 6,000 outside of Nederland that consider it to be their hometown. And they may come here to shop or work or go to school. And so there is a desire to have transit along that peak-to-peak corridor, which I think is one of the components of that grant that's being looked at.
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic. And you're right, so many different trip purposes that could be served along that important corridor.
When I look at the regional corridor on page 46, it's pretty noticeable that there's no 119. Is that not considered a key corridor for the county?
Yep. So sorry, I highlighted that. So I moved on to page 46 of the packet. The regional corridors that are shown on the map here are the ones that were developed by RTD through what's called the Northwest Area Mobility Study. That's what's meant by NAMS there. And that study was done back in 2014. So it did identify this set of regional corridors that would include regional bus rapid transit, commuter bikeways, and operations and safety improvements on these specific corridors, which was 119 between Longmont and Boulder, Colorado 7 between Boulder out to I-25 and beyond, and then 287 South Boulder Road and Colorado 42, as well as Northwest Rail. So that was a specific set of regional corridors that came about from that study that were then integrated into Boulder County's transportation plan. But we also recognize there are additional corridors as well. Certainly all of 119 from Nederland into Boulder and beyond is important. Colorado 66. I'm trying to think if there's a whole variety of additional corridors above and beyond the specific ones that were highlighted as part of the Northwest Area Mobility Study. But that's a really important point.
Great. We're running low on time, so let's.
Okay. All right, let me cut to the chase here. So on page 47 of the packet is just an example of over the last several months, Boulder County's been looking at a whole variety of potential sales tax levels that could be considered for this renewal, all the way from the low bookend, which is the 0.1% or the 1/10 of a penny, all the way up to a penny, and then 3 different levels in between. And then as part of that, looking at those different funding levels, I'm moving on to page 48 of the packet, what could be funded inside each of those buckets, depending on how big the bucket is, right? You could put more types of things in there. So we've been looking at that over the last several months, and again, different options and trade-offs for each of those. And now I'm moving to page 49 of the packet. And then most recently, back in April-May timeframe, Boulder County conducted a formal poll of voters across the county to get their thoughts on that different range of funding levels. One that was polled was the current level, keeping it at the 0.1% for another 15 years, just a straight extension. Another option was 0.3 and another option was 0.7, just to try to test interest levels from the voters. Based on the results from the polling, the only one that polled well was keeping the current level of funding at the 0.1%. So while those other higher levels were tested, the results were not favorable. I'm moving on to page 50 of the packet. And so basically, given that polling results in our conversations with our staff teams and our commissioners, it really helps center the conversation around what are the priorities for how to invest the dollars going forward at that 0.1% level. So that's what we're out seeking information from communities on, is how best to go about prioritizing the funding levels. I'm going to move on to page 51 of the packet. The pie chart that's on the left side reflects, when we look back over the many years of the current sales tax level, how we've been investing those dollars in terms of roadway safety and regional trails of transit and regional corridors. And then looking forward, what could be one option, it's not set in stone by any means, it's just meant to start the conversation, would be a proposed approach to keep things basically the same, but squeeze in a slice of pie at 5% for the mobility and access programs that we were talking about earlier. Those are currently not funded through our sales tax today. And so we would look to do that going forward. It's like we're seeking input on, and then retain the funding at the 15% level for regional trails and bikeways, retain the 15% for transit, 10% for regional corridors, and then have the remaining, majority of the pie, 55% for roadway safety and resilience.
Perfect.
So that's basically what we're seeking, your feedback from you all tonight in terms of what are the project categories that you think would be the most supported by, that you think are the most important and would be supported by your community. And then we're taking all this information we're gathering and sharing it with the county commissioners so they can make a decision this summer about whether or not to put something on the ballot for this November. So that's kind of the wrap up piece. I think there was just one more slide about next steps. So we can just
have a few
on the
things
questions
that I'd like to mention, if I may. You guys can hear me? Sorry. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Two things. One would be that I know that Netherland as a community would be interested in trail connectors that go onto county land. There's, you know, a number of trails that we have that kind of end unceremoniously sometimes, that might be very useful to connect to other parts of town through county lands. And we're doing a trails master plan right now and doing public outreach on that right now. In fact, it's on the agenda tonight. So we'll have more details to the specifics of that, but we would love if some of that could be funded with a sales tax. It does always dismay me a bit when I see these presentations that have Netherland either underneath a graphic on the side of the Boulder County map or just cut off altogether, because it does sometimes feel like we get left behind a bit in these conversations. But the other one, I think, of a kind of secondary importance would then, this is like in order of what's most important, least important, you know, trail connectors, those kinds of things, super important, but also like maybe not the most pressing issues that we have right now. And then from there is increasing, as Trustee Blakemore said, increasing transit from Boulder to Nederland and then across the peak to peak. We have a lot of challenges in our community with being environmentally sustainable. We use our cars a lot. There's not many walkable areas, and there are not many ways for us to get around in the mountain towns using transit. So even though it's a small amount of people, our environmental impact might be significantly more significant than the environmental impact from someone living down below, simply because of the way that we have to get around. So I think that your dollars are well spent up in the mountains in getting us into buses and into public transportation, even if it's fewer people. And then I think maybe of some, for me at least, of primary importance is not just safety of the roads, but roads that provide for safety. And I think I mentioned this in a consortium of cities meeting, that we would love to see evacuation routes, fire roads, and things like that, that are partnership roads. So we have provisional approval from the county to build one as it is, but we don't have any funding for it. And even if we did get the funding for it, which we are working towards, we would have no way of maintaining like an emergency egress route from one of our neighborhoods that does not have adequate egress if there were to be a wildfire in that neighborhood. So adding things like that into this plan, that the ongoing maintenance and construction of emergency roads, of evacuation roads, especially roads that do cross county lands, and our partnerships with the county, that would be hugely helpful for us in Ned.
Thanks.
I just wanted to add one thing about that, Kathleen, that there might be, just on the emergency access, there might be some federal funding. I don't know if you guys have pursued that at all, but the county.
We are working with FEMA very closely right now. It's quite an intense process and quite a difficult process. But even if we do get that funding, the ongoing maintenance is going to be a challenge and an issue for years to come.
Okay, well, I just wanted to offer that, you know, the county has received that funding in the past, and we've been successful at applying for it and implementing it. So we'd be happy to talk with you about that. I've worked on some of those. Tim has worked on some of those. So just give you our perspective on how to deal with that funding source. So.
County support on that would be great, and thank you for that. And maybe that's something that we should also put into our ongoing IGA discussions, because that needs to be renewed as well. So thank you.
And Eric, I have forwarded that request and your concerns on to our road maintenance and public works management team. So someone should be reaching out. It really a lot depends on the specifics of the situation. My gut tells me that whatever arrangement we can work out would be outside of the sales tax. It's not really like you said, it's an ongoing maintenance problem. Who's doing what? So that would be great to work out.
Great, thank you.
I have a couple quick questions. One is about dogs on the NB bus during the summer, on the weekends and holidays. Dogs are allowed on the Hesse shuttle, I believe, and the NB bus is free weekends and holidays during the summer. Are dogs allowed on the NB bus on those days?
My understanding, and I'll write down your question and find out for sure, but my understanding is that RTD does not allow dogs on their buses other than service animals, but we do, as you said, we allow them on our recreational shuttles and other transit providers in the county allow for dogs as well. So I don't think that RTD allows that, but I can double check for you.
Yeah, I thought,
That's a good point about if we're trying to link the services on the MB and the HESI shuttle, that would be,
I've had that question come up from the community, so.
yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, so the other question is about the Mountaineering area volunteer drivers. Now, would they be driving personal vehicles or Boulder County vehicles?
Let's see, I put info, I don't know all the different parameters for that program. I'm looking up some of the details about it, and I would be glad to share that with you. And I think Angel would be able to provide more details on how the logistics of the program work. I'm sorry, I was just trying to find it on our website real quick, and I didn't see it. So let me find out from her, and I could follow up with that for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, board?
Question from the public.
Go Ron.
I'll be short. I had to leave the meeting for about 15 minutes. Is there any plan to extend the bike path from where it's recently ended with the renovations of Boulder Canyon into or nearer to, closer to Netherland?
Tim, do you want to answer that? I'm looking up the volunteer driver program real quick.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something we've been looking at for many years. I think our current goal is to extend that path up to, I think they call it tunnel number 1. Even that short distance is a huge challenge given the topographic and property constraints up in Boulder Canyon. Not to mention working with CDOT, who have been very supportive. So at this point, we've gotten as far as we have. The next stretch would be a big challenge, but it's certainly been on Boulder County's radar for quite a while. I would say that with the extension, the continuation of the 0.1%, we're talking about a very limited program. It's certainly a critical amount of money. But if you think about, I think Netherland sales tax is around 9% or 8.9%. So we're talking about 1/90th of that money coming to this program. So it's been critical, but it is not enough money to really be doing huge improvements, which the Boulder Creek and Canyon Trail is certainly a need, but it's a huge challenge and a huge cost. So it is on our radar.
Great.
Quick follow-up question. Is it land acquisition and easements that are the challenge, or is it something else?
There are significant private properties in Boulder Canyon. And a lot of the property owners are reluctant to have a trail on their property. But just the sheer topography of Boulder Creek and the highway there is a challenge. So they say everything's doable if you have enough money. Private property is sort of an exception to that rule. But we have a plan, sort of an idea, a concept to get the trail up to tunnel number 1. But we have no plans right now to start work on that specific effort.
Could I ask a follow-up question here? Is this scope of work and potential design specifically centered on Boulder Canyon as a road and Boulder Creek, or has there been outreach to City of Boulder, who now owns the pipeline coming out of Barker Reservoir down to the power plant there? It used to be owned by Boulder County yourselves. Have you ever considered running a bike path up your power lines, considering that the Blue Dot trails already go dang near halfway down the canyon? And that would allow you to go up the ridge, follow the line that your water line already runs, which is already built to be at a relatively easy grade. So I guess my question is, why would you blast a canyon when you already have a water pipeline to follow?
Yeah, I'd have to follow up on the specifics of that. I mean, Boulder, the city of Boulder property's certainly been in play. There are some locations that are literally blocked by private property.
Well, the pipeline has an egress, does it not? As an existing egress, I would imagine it has an egress if it goes through Boulder or private property. And I guess my question would be, up to 5 years ago, Boulder County owned that pipeline. So what work has been done to look at running a trail on that pipeline? It already overcame the private property issues, or else it wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I can certainly look into that and get back to you. I can tell you that everything's been looked at pretty carefully from a alignment alternative perspective. The water lines in general are not necessarily owned property. They sometimes are easements across private property.
I'm
But
aware
it's
of
a
that,
good
but that
point.
infrastructure is owned by City of Boulder and was owned by you, and you can see that in the purchase thing. So yes, if any feedback, follow up on that, I would appreciate, and just kind of, I guess, the encouragement to maybe look beyond roads and rivers and look to other infrastructure that already has passed through private property as a means of getting regional trail transportations. There is not only that water line, there is also a gas line that runs through that same section.
Well, and
Yeah,
then
thank you. That's great.
there's Magnolia Road too. That is a good road for biking. That connects lower on.
The Blue Dot Trail is the pipeline come off Magnolia Road. It's a matter of they connect down to Boulder Canyon to less than maybe a couple hundred yards. The tile 2 he's talking about of where the next plan is would take the bike path up into what used to be XL's power plant, is now owned by the city of Boulder. And while it is a very steep hill, there is potential. So if we're looking at 5-10 years down planning, maybe let's look at planning on going into the woods with a bike path versus blasting a very, very beautiful, world-renowned rock climbing canyon to get a bike path on the road.
Okay, we appreciate the feedback on that and suggestions on it, and we just would need to take that back for more discussion about it. I just want to be mindful of all of your time this evening. I didn't know if there were other thoughts or suggestions around the sales tax piece in particular. Again, it'd be great if we could have more ongoing conversations about potential transportation projects we could work on together.
We'll come back to you with that. Karen's working on exactly those issues.
Okay.
Tim,
I
that
did
was a
put
good, that was a good example, 1/90th of our sales tax.
I did put a link in the chat for more information on the Mobility for All programs as well.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And the video I've seen a couple times, and I do recommend that everyone take a look at it. She put it, Kathleen put a link in the chat.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kathleen, Tim, and Stacy. We appreciate you being here with us this evening.
Thank you, folks.
Great. Thank you for having us. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
So now moving on
thank
to
you
our
all.
first action item of the evening. This is a Transportation Land Use Technical Assistant Pilot application. And we have Nikki Dunn here, who is the Parks Manager, to review the same and tell us what she's looking for tonight.
Thank you, Macy. Town staff and ProSAP Board are seeking to apply for the Transportation Land Use Technical Assistant Pilot application for development of the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Master Plan, PROST. This is offered through Denver Regional Council of Governments. This technical assistant pilot program will connect local governments with consultants to reassess plans or studies that have transportation and land use connection and consider a sub-area of the jurisdiction, such as a corridor or urban center. Projects will examine past efforts to find opportunities to remove barriers in the way of achieving local planning goals or provide communities with an opportunity to analyze how the plan has performed in achieving stated goals. Plan reassessment projects may also leverage current data and methodologies to update prior analysis to ensure planning efforts are reflective of current conditions. Since Trustee Blakemore is proposing pursuing another grant opportunity for the Master Transportation and Mobility Plan, and town was awarded funding for the housing study, town staff feel that it is appropriate to pursue this grant for Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Master Plan, since ProSab has already started public outreach and could use the support with the development of the plan. The PROS Master Plan is a document that is revised periodically that guides ProSab, Public Works, and the BOT in maintaining and developing the Nederland trail systems. There is no match for this grant. Town staff and ProSab would like to request $25,000 from the Denver Regional Council of Governments. Question before the board is, does the BOT approve ProSab applying for the Transportation Land Use Technical Assistance Pilot application?
So we'll open it up to the Board of Trustees now. And then this is an action item, so this will need a vote this evening.
Does town staff feel confident they have the time to do this grant without taking away from any of the other necessary duties?
Excellent question. Thankfully, this grant would actually alleviate my time constraints. These guys would be able to come in and take this planning piece of it out of it. We're already setting up for ProSab for the farmers markets and everything else, trying to support, I and my team are trying to support ProSab however we can in collecting information on the Trails Master Plan feedback from the public. So this kind of a grant would actually alleviate a lot of my stress and Miranda's stress as well. We would have to look at writing the Prost book ourselves if this grant would not be obtained. So yes, I think it would alleviate stress rather than add to.
Does town staff aware of when the last time Prost was updated?
2013?
Oof, and they're supposed to be updated every 5 years. Being on ProSab, having tried to do this ourselves, yes, I'm fully in support of this and see no reason with no match we shouldn't go for this.
Thank you, Trustee Baumhover.
I agree. Who else would like to speak?
Being on ProSab myself right now and knowing how impossible it is for us to do this ourselves, I could not be more in favor of applying for these funds.
I think I'm hearing a quorum. Sarah, do you have any questions?
So I went to the webinar for this grant program, and it's really a great thing that they're trying out. They just have a limited amount of money this time. It's like 125,000, 150,000, and a limited number of grants that they'll give out. And they do supply the consultant too. So you have a choice of using one of their consultants or finding your own. But so the consultant's already vetted. Yeah, I think it's a great thing to do.
Thank you, Trustee Blakemore.
Any other questions from the board before we go to public comment? Macy, is anybody from the public want to speak?
I'm not seeing anybody.
Okay. Then do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve ProSab applying for the Transportation Land Use Technical Assistance Pilot application.
Second. Macy, call the vote.
Trustee Blakemore,
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahone,
Yes.
and Trustee Baumhover.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And Nikki, thanks for doing your homework.
Yes, Nikki, thank you for being here this evening. So moving on to our second action item of the evening, we have the Nederland Transportation and Mobility Plan. Let me scroll down.
And Jim, hang with us. We'll get to you.
Okay, thank you, Macy. There's quite a bit of text here, so I thought, has everyone, all the trustees gotten a chance to read the document? Eric? Okay, so rather than reading it or summarizing it, what I'm going to do is go through each section and see if any of the trustees have questions on the sections. So this is a request for matching funds for a Nederland Transportation and Mobility Plan. The first section under summary is purpose. And then the problem statement. An example development process. Example data and analysis. The budget section is what I used for a cost estimate. And I looked at two different plans, the Steamboat Plan and Erie. The Steamboat Plan had a budget of $176K and was published in 2021. The Erie Plan was published in 2018 with a budget of $96K. The consultants who developed the Erie Plan recommended a budget of $100K to $150K. I'm recommending a budget of $125K, which is the minimum budget for DRCOG tip funding. And that budget would be used to pay a transportation planning firm to develop the Transportation Master Plan. Funding is from the Denver Regional Council of Governments Transportation Improvement Program. The minimum tip funding amount is $100K. Minimum match is $20,000, which is $25,000. So that's 20% of $125,000. The DDA agreed at their June 8th meeting to provide $10,000 towards the required matching funds. The remaining matching funds of $15,000 would come from the town's budget. We do have a recommendation from Alex Hyde-Wright, who is a principal transportation planner with Boulder County and chair of the Boulder County Subregional Forum of Technical Advisory Committee, which scores the Boulder County TIP applications. And he thought it was a good competitive project for three reasons. One is that Nederland is not applying for any other funds in this call. And in the past, DRCOG likes to provide funding to all the agencies that applied. $100K is not a lot out of the total $16 million that Boulder County has been allocated. And he believes it's a good project. It'll check a lot of boxes and probably score well. Schedule. Application is due June 24th. Awards are announced September. We would solicit and evaluate RFPs from at least 3 and up to 5 transportation planning firms during fourth quarter of this year. Choose a firm and then spend the year of 2023 developing the plan. So it's a not a grant, but a reimbursement contract where we get reimbursed for expenditures that we make on the project. If we didn't apply in this round, we could apply again in a couple years during the call 4, and Boulder County is expecting $18.9 million to be allocated to them for that call unless DRCOG can't meet their greenhouse gas planning standards for 2050, and they're currently at 70 to 80%, but they have some ideas on how to improve that percentage. And then there are some attachments. So I'm writing the application, and I'm planning on staying with this project to see it through, helping staff as much as needed in writing the RFPs, reviewing the proposals, helping organize the transportation committee that I think will have to get this project through. It is similar to development of comprehensive plan as far as getting the community involved. The end result of the plan is a strategy, an implementation strategy that would consist of a prioritized list with cost estimates of infrastructure projects, programs, and policies to meet the town's current and future transportation and mobility needs. So I am happy to take questions from the trustees.
Yeah, I've got one for you, or a couple.
Okay.
First of all, who's your committee and what's your public outreach plan?
So the public outreach would be detailed by the consultant. I've seen a lot of different methods in the Steamboat Springs statement of work from Tool Design. They used a website. They used meetings with the stakeholders and the public and the government. The committee, to see this through, we would need representatives from staff, from the community organizations, from the government.
Okay.
Kind of like a guiding body. So not really similar to what we had on the comprehensive plan.
And is parking a part of this plan, is it a subset of the?
Yes, parking. Parking is analysis of our current parking utilization in order to develop and prioritize recommendations. There is some parking generation and distribution methods that could be used, and these are developed by the Institute of Transportation Engineers as a way to estimate future demand for parking. So yeah, parking is a part of this.
Great. One last one for me, and then we'll go around. But the mechanism is so basically they open like a line of credit, and then we spend the money and we get reimbursed. Is that how it works?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a contract. It is a reimbursement contract, is what Dr. Cog calls it.
Great. It's a pretty fast approval process, it looks like. And it looks like you're asking for a very reasonable amount according to the feedback you've gotten so far.
Yeah, the way it works is that there's a representative from each of the different members of the Boulder County Subregional Forum for Dr. Cog TIP, and that representative is from staff, and they will score the applications based on a rubric, give that back to Dr. Cog. For our forum, we are also asking Dr. Cog to also provide one score. And then, and in addition, once the applications are submitted, they are put online, publicly available for members of the public to comment on. And so then Dr. Cog looks at the scores, the public comments, and returns the list of projects that were approved and received funding.
Great. Board, who has questions?
I guess, well, one, thank you for taking all the time to kind of seek out this funding and look at it. My first question would be for town staff again, regarding time to write this grant, administer this grant. I understand Trustee Blakemore has taken a large amount of time and, from what I saw, written most of the application. However, as town staff, you are the ones that actually have to submit it and monitor it, deal with DRCOG. Do you feel that on top of all the other grants we have approved and the other workload you are foreseeing for the next 3 years, that you would be able to deal with this grant as well?
I believe so. Again, Miranda is not in attendance this evening, and I think she would be the best point of contact for any type of funding or grant type of process that we will be going through in the future.
It was more a concern for town staff time. We have a limited town staff and we put a lot of workload on you guys, particularly a lot of grants and a lot of, the more grants we have, the more connections we have, the more meetings you have. That means you have to be at a BOT meeting, a planning commission meeting, a ProSAB meeting, a SAB meeting. The public process involves the town staff being at every single one of those meetings, and all of those boards having communication and input prior to this grant being submitted. And I believe the submission date is in 10 days. So I'm just kind of sitting here going, this seems very rushed and like we are putting, as a new board, an excessive workload on town staff. So if you can't answer it, that's understood. I'd just like the rest of the board to be cognizant of that.
So Miranda has been working with me on this. She reviewed the aim that I submitted to DDA, and I've been talking to her about it, and she is in full support of it. It will take time from town staff, and based on the Steamboat Springs statement of work, they were meeting with town staff twice a week, so 2 more meetings a week. Now, in order for us to get transportation grants, it's very useful to have a master plan. And so that's another reason for doing this.
And I guess I get that. So the purpose of this plan would then be to use to go after DRCOG grants, FEMA grants. Do those grants have design requirements? So we're building a master plan to go after grants. Are we aware of the grants that we are developing a master plan to go after? Do they have design requirements, or are we open as a town to being able to design? As a BOT member for 4 years, we've often run into situations where we apply for a grant and then later in the process realize that funding stream and source has very specific design requirements that are not in line with our design standards as a town or our comprehensive plan or our master plan. So I have a big fear that we would develop a master plan to go at grant funding that effectively doesn't actually allow us to build what our citizens want built, which means we've spent 3 years making town staff chase their feet. And I believe I'm not seeing anything in this plan besides that we can qualify as a master plan. To clarify, you've done exceptionally good work. This is a great thing. And as a town, it probably would behoove us. But my fundamental question is, as a board, do we want to be developing a master plan to go at grant funding that locks us into design standards that are not in line with our constituency?
So the plan provides a implementation strategy. So it's really a scoping of projects as far as an estimate of the cost, how they interrelate with each other, what kind of funding might be available for them, what the effort would be, what the community support is, what the value is to the town. as far as safety and reducing emissions, reducing congestion. So I don't think there would be an issue with locking into a design. And we have a transportation improvement program funding right now for the visitor center parking area, and then the sidewalks over to the RTD park and ride.
Has the town of Nederland ever had a transportation master plan developed? This would be town staff.
I'm not aware of one, but this plan also will utilize past and current studies like the Trails Master Plan, the DDA parking study. The comprehensive plan has a transportation component to it.
And will these studies go back to the 2005 BOT parking study before DDA was commissioned, or the 2012, I believe, Planning Commission parking study, both at costs of $75,000?
I've only seen one parking study from DDA.
That could be because the 2005 has changed over from record. So I guess I'm for this. I think 15,000 is not too much. If DDA is going to pass the 10, one caveat that I have as a fear as a BOT member is we're going to ask town staff to do this. We're going to go through this grant process. We're going to spend 3 years developing this, and it's going to be another one of those nice little plans that is put up in town hall on a shelf, just like the Prost plan, just like the Trails Master Park plan, just like Envision 2020, just like the comprehensive plan, just like the Housing, Health, and Human Services plan. So
yeah,
I will vote for it, but I really don't see that it is going to actually produce benefits to our towns besides giving us the ability to go after funding.
So it's a 1-year development process. So during 2023. And yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I'm going to be on the Board of Trustees for 4 years. And so I'm going to see it be something that we're going to use.
Well, then I will thank you for your work and support you fully in this, and wish you the best of luck.
And thanks for doing it early in your term.
And I would just like to offer some clarification. I did reach out to Miranda and asked if she is supportive of this, and she did say that she is in full support of this. And she thanked Karen for pulling together most of the application.
Well, here's the next 10 days. Thanks.
Thank you.
Eric, go
Thank
ahead.
you, Karen. Thank you, Karen, for putting this together. I fundamentally agree with Jonathan, but without a plan, that we're not going to build anything anyway, I guess. So at least we could have one, even if it does sit on the shelf. But yeah, good to know what it is that we're missing as well, and maybe it will come up with some creative ideas that we haven't even thought of in terms of how to better structure our community or better maintain our transportation networks and our infrastructure. Who knows what good might come out of it? And I think for $15,000, that'll work for me. I guess the big question is to make sure that the way that we approach the consultant and the way that we approach developing this plan is what's the right thing to say? I just want to make sure that we go into it sort of with an aggressive approach, and I don't doubt that Trustee Blakemore will have an aggressive approach in working with a consultant to really truly identify our issues and make sure that we're not just saying things, but rather using the analysis to lay a strong foundation for what Netherland might be able to do in the future, even if we never actually get there.
Yeah, and I've asked the DDA to provide input on the RFPs.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I don't mean to turn this into a discussion item, but the big thing for me is that we're talking about the big issues and we're identifying the places we know are the right places and the areas that we need to improve. We don't really need a consultant to know some of these things. We know what they are. So let's get the data that we need and the plans and the foundation that we need to go after the funding that'll actually get it done. I'm talking about building parking garages on the RTD lot. I'm talking about building second bridges and things that actually matter. So I'm just hoping that we pursue this aggressively.
Yeah, for sure. There's also, I have a long list of example projects like an electric town shuttle, safe pedestrian and bike crossings across Highway 72 at the community center and the fire station, parking lots on the outskirts of town, a second bridge over Middle Boulder Creek, bike lanes, sidewalks, additional turn lanes, bike and pedestrian trails from town to Nederland Municipal High School. But all these will come out of community input, data, and analysis. And there's a lot of data and analysis that is available and we haven't taken advantage of. So that's my thought there.
No,
Macy,
that's
better,
absolutely.
something's going on the computer there.
Thank you.
I did,
Is
I
there?
really appreciate.
Eric, we
Can you
can't
hear
hear
me?
you right now. If you could just give us a second.
I'll give you a second.
All right, go ahead and give it a shot.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, some of those things like generating what was called in the packet, Karen, big data sets. I think that they might be quite small for Netherland. Actually, these data sets and quite easy to digest.
Yeah.
But using that kind of technology and everything to do these analyses, I think is really important. But at the same time, I think we also, as a community, kind of know some of the things that we'd like to see, and getting the data that we need to make those projects viable and possible, I think, is really important as well.
So the big data, what that does is it provides not just volume of traffic counts, but actually individual traffic patterns. So how an individual moves through the town, and then aggregates that data. So it doesn't identify like
Right.
Eric's going
Sure.
from one place to another. So,
They can look at how I'm walking through town. They'll see that some improvements need to be made. But then the last thing that I would just say is that I really think that this will help our streets department prioritize road repairs and road projects. I think that sometimes it feels like you're always just catching up, but if you have a really clear idea what are the most used roads, what's most important for commuters, what's most important for individual neighborhoods, then you can really drill down on those and make sure that they're in good shape. So I think there's a lot of good that can come out of this. Thank you for doing the work, and yeah, I hope we get it.
Do we have anybody that's registered for public comment on this one?
I don't see anybody.
Okay, then I'll call for public comment for people that are still with us. Hearing none, do we have a motion? Okay, I'll make the motion. What's in front of us is on the aim is that we authorize this application to be completed in the next 10 days. Thanks.
Does the board consent to provide $15,000 in matching funds in 2023 for development of a Nederland transportation and mobility plan?
Motion for the Netherland BOT to commit 15,000 of 2013 budget. No, 2024, 2023. What did I say? 14? Decade back. My bad. Motion to approve 15,000 of the 2023 Netherland BOT budget for the development of a transportation master plan.
Second. Macy?
Trustee Coombs Ismail?
Yes.
Trustee Baumhover?
Yes.
Trustee Blakemore?
yes,
And Mayor Pro Tem Mahold?
Yes,
Thank you.
motion passes.
Karen, I'll be thinking of you writing your grant while I'm writing my grant.
All right. So moving on to our first and only discussion item of the evening, we're talking about parking in Nederland, and we have the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission with us tonight, Jim Reese.
Hey,
Thank
Jim, I
you.
know you've been waiting. Can I request a 5-minute
Oh.
break?
Yeah, 5 minutes break. Okay. Okay, Macy, set it up.
Discussion item is we have Jim Reese, the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission, to walk us through this item.
Thank you. Good evening, Town of Nederland trustees and Mayor Pro Tem. I am the newly reappointed Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. I was thinking if I didn't get reappointed, I was going to get out of this meeting, but that didn't happen. These recommendations are not new. Anybody who's been around this town for a while have known this has been an issue, and it's just increasing as time and population sprawl continues. This mainly was compiled from the 2009 parking study with a lot of information that was previously put together by Trustee Corvalin and Trustee Danforth. That was extremely helpful, and a lot of information by reviewing the parking surveys. We're going to skip right to the 4 recommendations. Commercial parking fund moratorium in the central business district, develop additional parking in town, implement paid parking, and add wayfinding and signage and walkability. Our first recommendation, the moratorium. The main thing on that moratorium was we wanted to do a 2-year moratorium on any payments into the commercial parking fund. And our recommendation was to return funds to the one person that I was told has the only person who has paid into that fund, and that there's $5,000 in that fund. And that was mainly due to the fact that the feedback from the parking survey and previous meetings that I've been privy to was that it's just not equally enforced. That unfortunately, every person and every business has an opportunity to come before, not unfortunately, I mean, it's good, it's the public process, but has the ability to come before the BOT and ask for a hardship discount or have the fees waived. And that has happened most of the time, except for one individual that paid for 2 parking spots at $2,500 each, and that there's $5,000 in that fund. Off-street parking calculations, we were going to also continue with the moratorium of that in the central business district only, because as we know, there's just a limited amount of ground in there, and every new business that tries to build something there runs into that problem. Every packet that comes before us for an SRU or that comes for you before approval, that is a big issue that has to be done. And I really think of this as a problem that the entire town of Nederland needs to work together to solve, not put it on, individual business people. I know what the code says, but it's just one of those situations where the reality is there's just not the ground there to do it. And we want our businesses to continue to come to town, build and thrive in our community. I think we need to look at this from a different direction. The exception to that is ADA spaces. That is required by law, and those will continue to be provided for even in the central business district if this was approved. Recommendation 2, develop additional lots in town. The reason I gave you guys hard copies is so that you could kind of look at the map too while we're talking through this. The main idea with that was to try to develop additional parking lots that are within walking distance of the central business district. I think anyone who's been to area towns, Boulder, Idaho Springs, any of these, I think it is unrealistic to think, I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about the parking lots and then we'll get to paid parking. Sorry about that. The use of the old town shop was an area that we had talked about. I know that has been designated for future affordable housing, but as it sits currently, it is not being used. We talked about this as a great area because there's sidewalks that travel over there, about a 10-minute walk to get there. And we were discussing with Miranda, and the main thing on that is that we already have the ability to, with some funding from the DDA, which I've been told really is invested and wants to get involved in developing some of these parking lots, to come in there and possibly prepare that as a parking lot now, pave it with our own internal public works folks, make that a decent parking lot that people will come to. We could set up kiosks in and, has clear delineation on the marking and all that stuff. And then at a later time, we can pave it with our own, we have that ability within public works now. And we could then at a later time, when funding does come available, that could be used for that affordable housing. The idea on that would be, we would look at all the drainage issues with an eye towards that future affordable housing. The other areas we were looking at was Lakeview Drive. If you look at your map, there's some down there just below 16. There's a big, long oval area there, cigar-shaped areas that go all the way to the end of Lakeview. We're going to encourage additional parking development along there, but mainly from Rodeo Court to the end of Lakeview Drive. The town owns the property that is between the road and the reservoir. And that could be built up, and we could put in as many as 80 additional angled parking spots along there that that would be additional parking. One of the other areas that I really was in support of was the Fisherman's Lot, but unfortunately, while our parking subcommittee was meeting for 8 times, that got designated for other use as a wetlands. If there was any ability to continue to use some of that at all, that was the idea was to try and have something, on all 4 corners of town within about a 10-minute walk to get back, to the central business district and where all the shopping is.
Yeah, I think park or construction on that doesn't even start till next year.
Okay, so that was, and again, these are all recommendations. You know, you guys are the final approving authority on this. You're going to hash this over and decide how you want to skin the cat on that and figure it out. But I just didn't want, even though we did not list it and it was recommended by Miranda, we take that off because that had already been voted on by you guys for other use. But I did want you to keep that in the back of your mind.
How many spaces do you think we could get at the town garage site?
I do not have the answer to that.
Okay.
I do not have the answer to that. I know that's a nice lot, large lot there, but I think that along is going to provide, along with Lakeview, we're going to provide the largest number of spaces, you know, on both the direct ends of town.
I'm a neighbor over there and I counted 65 during Frozen Dead guys that they got into that space.
Great. Thank you. I'll use that number from now on.
Okay.
So then some of the other things that we wanted to promote was the use of the Nederland Community Center as additional parking that a lot of people just overlook because if you're not from here, you don't really realize there's additional parking down below. One of the things that came up, Linda Glasser was on this subcommittee with me also, and she maintains that trail that comes down Jefferson from there out of her pocket. That is not town maintained. And so if we were going to start, as we get later, we're going to talk about trails and wayfinding and different things. But if we were going to promote these things, it would be, I think, a good idea for the town to say, hey, you know, we need to take this on. We can't hope that, you know, the goodness out of our hearts that volunteers in town are going to step up and take care of this for us. And, you know, people move, things change, situations change, health issues. So that's a nice little trail up there. It's a short walk from the community center down to the CBD. And then we were going to, again, this is all funding dependent, pursue additional private partnerships and look for possible spots to buy private lots in town. We discussed a few and basically, you know how it goes, you know, here's all the reasons why it can't be done. You know, I'm here just to give you some options for you to think about, not talk about all the things that are roadblocks that are going to keep you from getting there. Recommendation 3 was to phase in paid parking. And this is probably the one that is going to be the most controversial. As I started to say before, I don't think you can go to any surrounding community, short of like Ward, and expect to not pay for parking if you're going to be 10 steps from where you want to be. Okay. I'm cheap. So when I go down to Boulder to Pearl Street, I'll usually spend 15 minutes driving around on the side streets and walk 3.5 blocks in to try and find some parking rather than pay for parking. But I think that people would understand and expect that if you're going to park right on First Street and be able to step right out of your car, that's going to be something that you should have to pay for. We counted 25 possible spots on East First Street along there that could be developed into paid parking for the first phase. We would love to see this also phase in for phase 2, being the visitor center, using revenue from the first phase to help fund the parking fund. Again, as I told you earlier, I don't think that the paying into the commercial parking fund is really working for us as a town, and this provides an additional revenue source to do things like pave additional places, create trails and such. I will say that the parking study, that was the least popular thing. Paid parking for the most, no one wanted paid parking or free for locals, okay? Gosh, I don't know how you designate a local for a parking meter. I just don't understand how you do it. I think that if you're going to expect to not have to walk 10 minutes, you know, you should be willing to pony up. And then by providing these additional lots, then, you know, I think it is reasonable to say, hey, you don't want to pay the money, that's fine. You know, walk 10 minutes from, you know, Lakeview, walk from the old town shops, whatever ends up being developed. The other interesting thing with that, the next thing that I noticed in the parking survey was that most business owners there and their surveys were, we want more turnover on the parking street on East First Street. Mm-hmm. So there you got some conflicting views there. So there's been a lot of complaints in the past about skiers coming up, hikers coming up for the day, parking in there, jumping on the bus up to Eldora and picking up a
Employees, too.
spot. And employees, town employees, I think they're trying to police that to some degree. But paid parking would solve a lot of those issues as well as provide revenue for us to do other things for this. I was unable to get a good number. I tried with Cynthia and she's busy with 1,000 things. I was not able to get a good number. I really wanted to come and say, hey, here's the average amount of revenue you can expect from a parking meter in a year. I just couldn't find that information myself. Cynthia wasn't able to find it.
I've got something for you. I spent 3 days at a parking convention in Reno.
Excellent. I look forward to hearing what that comes down to, but it would be great to be able to say, hey, if we put 25 spots on there, in the first year, we can expect, from this range to this range of revenue to come in. And this is what we could expect from doing the visitor center. Do you want to throw that in right now, Mayor Pro Tem?
It's a longer discussion, but generally, a rule of thumb is $80,000 per year per parking place. And the goal from a traffic flow standpoint is that it's occupied 85% of the time. So one way is to use dynamic pricing to make sure that you maintain your 85%.
Excellent. Excellent. And that was some of the reasons why I was told it was difficult, because sometimes they charge more for less for the first 2 hours and it increases later. One of the things that was very popular was that a 30-minute free parking period, 15 to 30-minute free parking period, to allow for folks who are just going to run in real quick and do something.
Technology allows all these things. There's
Right.
a lot of things now. The big dichotomy, and I think we're moving away from technology-based or physical technology-based solutions like kiosks into virtual technologies, things like apps and license plate recognition. License plate recognition is really good now, to the point where you could do something for residents. You could do something for elderly. There's a lot of differentiation you can make once you can sort things out.
Excellent. It sounds like you have a lot of knowledge on that.
Oh, I've bored people at many cocktail parties.
Just clarification, was that 80,000 per meter per year?
Yeah.
So we're looking at 25 spots the planning commission has. With that, we'd be looking at $2 million essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, so town of Netherland residents just might want to think about that when they're paying their water bill and sewer bill, if they don't want to pay $3 to park in the middle of town.
And there's also some authorities we talk with who actually share it with the business owners to make sure that they're fully on board. They get two benefits out of it. They get the traffic flow and a piece of the action.
Well, and when I presented this to the DDA, I got some questions about how would it be done, what kind of park meters. I'm not going to tell you guys how to skin the cat. That's not my role. I'm here just to make some overview recommendations on things that, again, no new ideas here, just things that need to be, looked at, and the problem just keeps getting worse. And, so we're just giving you guys recommendations that we put, previously information put together that really we think are pretty straightforward. And, you can't make everybody happy in this world. You just can't. The main thing on this would be to encourage and think, Trustee Baumhover, that's just East First Street. And then if you were to include the visitors parking lot center right there, then potentially we could have some funds to buy some of these private lots around town and create additional parking. When we first started this, my response was, hey, any chance of a $5 million parking garage with all these, infrastructure dollars are coming down? And that got a good laugh. And then we went back to work on reality here. We want to encourage people to consider parking more on the outskirts of town and walking in. And, basically, like the business owners want, they want people to be able to turn over, and that will create, a difference between, so somebody who, and we'll get to the next one, why I think that will work, who wants to walk around our town who's a visitor, then if there's the next recommendation is wayfinding, signage, and trail walkability, is we want to provide easy information on where the parking is in town. If we develop this parking, we want more than just a single green sign with the arrow pointing to parking. You know, we want to have something at the visitor center and possibly, you know, somewhere else in town, the community center or something like that, similar to maybe one of those boards that you would see like at Waterworld that has the overview, you know, map of the town and you are here and the parking is here. You know, that's what we considered the signage. Wayfinding was going to be actual, you know, trails, you know, signage along the routes that we're going to show you. And hey, here's some walking paths that how you can get here. Here's the shortcuts that only the locals know about that you can come through. Here you can go straight up Jefferson and get right up to the community center without walking along the highway the whole way. These kind of things. The other thing that would be in conjunction with would be some kind of a, you know, those little boxes, you know, that you scan with your phone and pull up the available parking right there with your cell phone. You know, I believe that these things in conjunction, and not, the other thing is neglected to mention ProSab and the NDDA are already working towards these efforts. So we're kind of working in conjunction with them. But all of these things we're talking about, there's going to be some pushback on some of them from some folks. But I just think that it's a problem that its time has come. Just like short-term rentals finally bubbled up and you had to kind of grab it by the horns and deal with it. You know, this is one of those things that problem is not going to get better by pushing it down the road 3 years. Go ahead.
Several years, everything that we've done that's stuck, we started as a trial, including making First Street one way. That was a trial just between Memorial Day and Labor Day that took 7 years. Yep. And so I think that might be, I think that's how you bring people around is showing something that works. So we'll see. And then in terms of wayfinding, some of the apps that are around are quite good. What we had, my favorite one in Chicago was tied into Google Maps, and it knew where I was going and would reserve a parking place for me.
Wow.
Before I got there.
While we're on the subject of apps,
Yeah.
I do a little bit of traveling in the U.S. and outside the U.S. And I was in this one town in, I think it was Montana, and you were supposed to have an app to park. I couldn't download the app. And so what do? You know, you get a ticket because you haven't. So I like the kiosks in Boulder. And right now you punch in your license plate number.
Yep.
And then, you know, pay for it. And you don't have to put a ticket in your car. So
there's a couple of things on that. I went, after I got a parking ticket and I went into the parking office down in Boulder, I said, okay, now that we've taken care of that, do you have any advice for us up in Netherland as we consider parking technologies? And she said, just one thing, don't forget the old people, and have a solution for the old people. And, you know, that I think in some ways, license plate recognition is one of them, because essentially we've got a pretty good beat on who lives here and what their age bracket or if they want to have special consideration. So I think there's non-technology or passive technology ways of dealing with it. But I think you're right. Essentially, there's a number of people that simply won't have it or won't be able to use it.
well, I didn't have internet service to download the app as I was standing there next to my car that I just parked.
The ultimate catch-22. Okay.
Okay. The other thing I did want to mention about the benefit of paid parking is that the funds from that will then pay for the enforcement. Okay, so there's been concern about, you know, our limited police department and how much, you know, competing priorities they have. You know, this would be, again, I'm not telling you how to do it, but one of the recommendations that you could look at would be to have that be, okay, we're going to fund a part-time position that's available, you know, to come and do the enforcement on that, you know, and there's many different ways, especially with technology now, where somebody doesn't have to literally walk down the street and chalk mark the wheels anymore. You know,
it's illegal now.
Is it? I didn't know.
Jennifer Feinlovin told me that.
Okay. Getting to the summary, we did present this to multiple town boards, and as Trustee Baumhover said, we're in agreement with them on a lot of things on this. Some of the things, you know, I didn't agree with. I'll just point out the third bullet here, that we strongly agree with prioritizing signage and developing maps that show the availability of parking throughout town. That should be on the very last page.
Okay.
And then I'm just going to tell you, you guys, if you've been around town any length of time, I've been here since 2010. My wife was the town manager. I saw, every meeting there's going to be naysayers and people are going to come out. There's always pushback for new ideas. People don't like change. I mean, if you think back to the many, many meetings that were held on Tungsten Village and the amount of pushback, you'd have thought that we were going to destroy our town with that. And that's been one of the best additions to our town that I can think of in recent years. So sometimes hard choices just have to be made, and they're not always popular with some people in the community, but unfortunately, as elected officials, you guys, the hard decision falls to you. So my strong recommendation is that you look at this, you develop what you like about this, and take action sometime in the next year on this, and don't let this get pushed down the road another 3 or 4 years to the next board. I'll accept any questions you have for me.
Thanks, Jim. That's why we had you go last. Questions?
Yeah, I'll start. Do you know what the cost is to install a paid parking space?
I do not. And the part of the deal was we were looking at overview recommendations, and we weren't going to get down into the nitty gritty details, or we would have had recommendations for you sometime next year.
Okay. I think the rest of mine are comments. So I'm concerned about the fairness of the cost of parking to businesses who have businesses on First Street versus businesses in Caribou Village. Because in Caribou Village, they do provide the required number of parking spaces for the businesses, I assume, and those are for both employees and visitors. And there's a cost associated with allocating that property to parking. And so I understand we only have $5,000 in the commercial parking fund, but if we were to require businesses to either provide parking spaces for their employees and customers or pay into a commercial parking fund that we could then use to purchase and develop parking lots on the outskirts of town, I think that should be an idea that we consider. And maybe those parking spaces wouldn't cost as much as the real cost for them, but would be discounted a bit because they'd be on the outskirts of town. So that's one comment I have.
I did want to just remind you, though, that this is only pursuant to the Central Business District. So we didn't look at anything outside of that.
Yeah, I'm just saying that we're creating parking standards that are different for Caribou Village and Central Business.
Caribou Village is a privately owned business. It's a privately owned land. This is Town of Nederland land. Town of Nederland, no matter what we do, what our business policy could not affect how Tebow treats his businesses and his policies. He owns that parking lot. He determines how that works.
Oh, okay. So, and I understand that we can't require businesses on the First Street corridor to provide parking when there just isn't any land available for that.
That's exactly it. You hit on the exact reason
But-
right there, is that there's just really not the available land to develop.
But I'm just thinking, are we being fairer to all the businesses in town by requiring, not requiring them to pay into a commercial fund if they can't provide? So I'm just putting that out there. I've said this before. I said it at the Planning Commission when we were talking about parking. So the Old Town Shop, we have not committed to using that for affordable housing. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I'm not in favor of having parking lots in residential neighborhoods like the Old Town Shop. I'd like to see parking lots added to our use table, specifying the allowable zones for parking lots. I would also be concerned about encouraging public parking in front of residential properties. one other comment. My last comment is that with the restoration of the fisherman's lot to a wetlands, I believe there is a few parking spots that are maintained on the west end of that fisherman's lot.
Eric, any questions on your side? Questions, comments? Hold on a second. Not yet.
System seems very buggy.
Jonathan, let's go to you in the meantime. You're with us, Eric? Sign language?
I can hear him on.
I think we can hear you. Go, try again. Oh, are you muted, buddy? I'm just figuring, just try everything.
Put it in the question box or the chat. Okay.
Are you going to take public comment here?
Go ahead. Oops,
No, this is a discussion item, so there will not be any public comment. And we're trying to work out our sound so that we can get Eric Coombs-Ismail to comment on this discussion item.
I'll jump in here real quick. Hey, Eric, can you hear me? Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me? Can you hear us, Eric?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So first off, Jim, Planning Commission, thank you so much for these recommendations. I like that it was split into 4 recommendations, kind of the way I see this. Essentially, what we can nip in the butt right now. So for their first recommendation, this idea of the moratorium on both our commercial parking fund as well as the off-street parking calculations in the central business district. I think this is a no-brainer. I think the previous BOT said this almost 8 months ago. It just was never brought because we were waiting on these recommendations to make sure that the rest of the advisory boards and planning commission itself felt like this was a good idea. I am also fully into returning the funds that are in the commercial parking fund to the payee and doing away with that idea entirely. That idea was extrapolated from larger towns that have populations of 50,000 to 250,000. Fundamentally, if you look at the studies of how commercial parking funds are used, this town never had any business trying to go that route. There was never the ability to generate enough revenue from any of the businesses to produce really anything that would be beneficial. So it's been a great idea, but we've had it for 10 years. It has $5,000. It's time to do away with it. So I believe we should have that on our next BOT agenda, is both of these moratoriums. Let's nip it in the butt. We have plenty of businesses coming to town, and it takes the planning commission too long to make recommendations, and we're always arguing over parking at the end of an SRU or PUD, and myself or trustee Coombs-Ismail usually motions to do away with them. So
you've been here before.
I've been here before a lot, and I think these recommendations have been agreed upon by definitely the last BOT and a significant amount of the previous BOT to that.
Okay.
So second, my comments on the developing lots in town for parking would be the idea to redevelop Chipeta Park utilizing an oval. Right now in Chipeta Park, we only park people along the outside. The teens also pointed this out, that we're not utilizing any of the center of Chipeta Park. Some very simple islands that we could do diagonal parking, and then we could almost double the space in Chipeta Park. It is a central district. I'm not against the idea of using the old town shop. While I am aware that the neighborhood is not necessarily for this idea, I believe that the town owns a limited amount of land, and as the town BOT, we're the ones that get to choose to do with that land. That's a hard thing to say, but I believe that as a town, we must look at the benefit of the entire community over the desires of a relatively small neighborhood when you consider the different neighborhoods we have. I would say Dyer's is one of the smallest of our neighborhoods.
And a big portion of the neighborhood is here right now.
Correct. Community center does need promotion. I have concerns with the trails and access, whether it is maintained not by Town of Nederland. Any access to central business district from the community center is at such steep grades that during the wintertime it becomes dangerous for older folks. But I do encourage that for able-bodied individuals. This idea of designating parking on East 3rd behind Quick Mart, it is designated, it is signed, it is also back in, and I think we just need to promote it more. Looking through all of these, the idea of coordinating with RTD really comes down to the third recommendation of paid parking. RTD has told us they will not build a second addition onto that lot until they have a certain number of folks there. The fact is, we know where they park. They park in the visitor center lot, they park on First Street, and maybe they park on Tebow. So if we make First Street, visitor center lot paid parking, those that do not want to pay parking will drive a block over and park in the RTD, which eventually will push the RTD to build the second lot.
So I'm just going to jump in here
Go for it.
and say that the RTD park and rides are reserved for transit users. So
That is not the original MOU and agreement when we built it back in 2002, and I'm sure whoever their administrator is doesn't have that, but I'm sure we can find it on public record.
Miranda did say that they encourage that for additional overflow parking. And that would be, and that basically when we were doing some of our subcommittees, she'd found something probably in a previous MOU that they did not have a problem with us having people from Tungsten Village or visitors park in there, and that basically they're looking for that to get maxed out before they even look at any other solutions. So ideally, the $5 million parking garage idea is the best solution for our community, but it all comes down to, funds and there's going to be infrastructure dollars coming down the pike, in a lot of different areas are going to have to be spent. So I would love to see some, looking down 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the pike, down the path there and say, hey, this is something that we can start to work towards. But these recommendations are all things that I was hoping were implementable in the next year to 18 months.
And I think they are, and I would agree with that. In terms of the last recommendation, DDA is making great headway on the wayfinding, and I think that's just going to dovetail into this. I would like to see this BOT do the moratoriums, hold off on the recommendation to develop lots in town, and move forward with the paid parking. I honestly believe paid parking is the only solution for parking in this town because it will force people to the RTD lots and it will keep people out of our visitor center. There is nothing we can do about how parking is handled in the shopping center that is on Tebow. And in terms of fairness of business owners, I believe that the property or the business owners that rent from Tebow pay a little bit more in their rent to have the service of having parking provided with their business space, whereas the individuals on First Street might not be paying nearly as much because they don't have that provided. It is parking of the town. So we cannot look at being fair in our parking requirements of laws. We also have to take into account the market value of those businesses and what they are choosing to pay in for the retail spot that they occupy.
Can I ask if y'all can hear me?
We do.
Ah, there it is. So I hopped off and hopped back in during Jonathan's last comment, but Trustee Baumhofer, I'm sure that I caught the gist of it. Did I need to be there the whole time? No, I guess, and I missed the tail end of Trustee Blakemore's initial comments. So apologies if any of this has been said already. But I fundamentally agree with every recommendation. I mean, anyone who's been following the BOT for the last few years will know that I think that we need to do this moratorium ASAP. We need to fix our parking code to not require parking in the central business district. as it is currently defined, and we need to abolish that parking fund because it's just not working. And that has been my position for some time on this. And I strongly feel that we need another solution for this issue, and that is not the solution that's going to get us to where we need to go. I do fundamentally agree with pay parking. I do think that technologically speaking, it is much more inexpensive and feasible to have resident permits for short-term, in and out grocery store stops and things like that. If it's like a 15 to 30 minute period of time, with what Mayor Pro Tem Mahold was saying about license plate recognition, we can do that. I mean, I don't think that that's a problem. But what I would say, and I think this is where I might differ with Trustee Baumhofer just a little bit, is that I do think that we should work on developing additional parking if we are going to phase in paid parking. I think that doing those two things simultaneously would be helpful, I think, for our residents in terms of saying, look, we're doing this thing that not everyone's going to like. We're doing this thing that's going to be stressful for a number of people, but we are phasing in a few new, well-maintained, well-connected parking lots. They're not going to solve all of our problems, but maybe there's some places where you can park, and to make those lots initially free while charging for the CBD zone. So that way we kind of have a way that we can say, look, we know that this is a burden that we're putting on you. Here's a way that we're working to alleviate some of that burden by providing some lots outside of the CBD that are not paid. That would be the strategy I would love to see happen. And then in number 4, I mean, recommendation number 4 is the one, right? I mean, it seems like the least important, but I think in so many ways it is the most important. We need to sign our town properly. We need to point the way, as wayfinding sort of suggests. And if we do that, we can build what it points to. But right now, we don't really know where people are supposed to go when they come to town. We don't really have a methodology for how we organize human flow through town. And I think by wayfinding, we create a framework on which we can hang our parking strategy moving forward. So to me, that's huge.
Terrific. Macy, I was looking at our agenda. It says public comment may be given for each discussion item when called upon by the mayor. I wanted to go ahead and accept.
Yeah, that's correct. I made a mistake, and public comment is allowed under action and discussion and not informational.
Can I add one more thing before you go to public comment?
Please.
I just wanted to, I forgot to mention that we did have discussions about the DDA having funds that they really want to invest because this really benefits their businesses. Sure and does. So when I came and presented this, that's the only subcommittee that I came in person and actually committed to. And I directly told them, I said, we're looking for you as partners, as funding partners for these things, because these directly benefit you. There's things you're asking for. So I would expect there to be a revenue source that is readily available to do some of these low-hanging fruit, to get the town shop site set up, to get the parking meters set up, to maybe develop Lakeview. But just, I would encourage you, instead of looking, people that are going to come out and they're going to say, hey, there's, a dozen different spots on this map that are designated. Pick a couple. And let's work on actually developing those and coming up with a plan with the DDA on how we can fund that. And I'm an action-oriented guy. We talk about things until they end up dying on the vine. And so I would love to see, like Trustee Baumhofer said, see this board come up with an action plan and say, we'll take the negative press from some folks in town, but this is a problem that isn't getting any better.
So are you offering to spearhead this action plan?
I'm definitely not doing
that.
Okay. There was one thing, I'm sorry, guys. There was one thing I forgot to say. I wrote it in the chat. I'm not sure if that got read while I was unable to speak, but I do very, very much agree with Trustee Blakemore in that in terms of recommendation number 2, the lots that we choose to pursue developing, if any, we really need to be careful with residential neighborhoods. I do think that you can have some impacts that really nobody wants to have, and I also agree with Josie Baumhover's assessment that we do need to look toward the greater good, but I would like to do our best to minimize impact on residential neighborhoods when developing any new lots. And I think that means choosing lots that might not be the best options, but will still provide some parking spots, right? So it's kind of like making that that compromise.
Can we, Jim, are you complete? Can we open it for public comment? Macy, who's first in line?
No one else wishes to speak? I would like to.
Hold on a second, Ron. Yeah, Ron, you were the first to ask, so let's go with you, and then I think Kathleen's next in line.
I'd like to speak in two categories. First, as the treasurer of the DDA, I think that the DDA majority, not necessarily everyone, but the majority are very interested in investing in a project that does produce revenue, and that revenue could be shared three ways, maybe four ways. One would be with the town, one would be with the merchants, one would be in terms of giving breaks to locals, and the third would be if there is a lot put into a residential neighborhood, something done, even if it were direct monetary payment to the neighborhood for the inconvenience, that might work. So I'd like to throw those factors into the mill for consideration. As a private individual, I have studied parking long and hard, and Nederland, I think, is in the position to leapfrog all of the mechanical kiosk gates and things like that with phone apps. And for the comment that old people like me who don't understand those apps could be just sent a bill because of the license plate recognition technology, which has advanced in the last 3 years incredibly. And the purveyors of these types of programs are just beating each other over the head trying to sell them because they are so easy, they're so convenient, and they work very well. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Kathleen?
Can you hear me?
We do.
Kathleen Shipai, a 30-year resident, 18-year business owner. I first want to say that I want to return the money from the parking fund to the individual who was charged. But I want people to know that for the 10 or 11 years that money was collected, I have a tracking that over $100,000 is missing from the parking fund. I'm going to suggest, forget about a moratorium, just remove the parking fund altogether because we're not going to go back to it. Why pass a moratorium? It didn't work. It wasn't enforced fairly. I know that when the initial smokehouse was built, those people paid in over $54,000 at least. When I talked to the initial owner, she said she remembered it to be between $45,000 and $60,000, and she didn't know exactly because she had already sold the building years before I contacted her to find out if she had been charged. So I would like to abolish the parking fund altogether. I don't believe that parking should be put into any neighborhoods. But I did like hearing what Ron just said. If the neighbors want to get a cut for parking or somehow get paid parking contribution and the neighbors agree with it, then I'm okay with it. But I don't like the idea of it to begin with. And I want the whole board to know that I have been studying the parking since 2010 when the town came at me and told me I needed to provide 35 spaces at 95 East First Street, and that was outrageous. And then there's other businesses like Salto who provided 4, even though their blueprints showed that whole outdoor patio as parking. It didn't get built that way. The other thing I want to point out is that the Central Business District parking rules have been addressed in a total of 5 ordinances in the entire history of Nederland. And the CBD was exempt from parking requirements in every one of those, and it was exempt because the building code allows the business owners in the CBD to build property line to property line. The language that was adopted, and I wanted to point this out because I know Karen Blakemore says, well, we want to treat it all the same and the whatnot, but the first 5 versions of the code, of the ordinances that discuss this, basically the language for the 300 that a business needs to provide currently, the business needs to provide parking spaces within 300 feet of their business. That was for everywhere. That was the language for everywhere except the CBD. And then the 5th ordinance that was passed was 465 was the ordinance number, and that was stamped and signed and sitting in Town Hall until last March, and that had a CBD exemption. In the middle of Ron Mitchell's SRU for outdoor sales that was misapplied for his paid parking, in the middle of that, Jen Madsen and Miranda came to the board and called an emergency meeting and had the board at the time, adopt language that I still haven't identified where Jen Madsen got it, but it removed that it wasn't officially removed, the CBD exemption, until March of last year, and it made no sense, and I begged everyone not to vote for that. And nobody listened, but we didn't have a lot of time to review it because it was an emergency meeting. So I'm going to ask that the code also, on top of getting rid of the parking fund, that we also get rid of any parking CD requirement in the code right now. I don't believe it was legally changed in March. I believe the whole process was unlawful, the way it was presented, and the history of the town shows that all 5 ordinances that address CBD parking had an exemption for it. The thing that happened last year, I dispute the legality of it. I know Jonathan Boemhover also had some questions to the legality of how it all went down. And I think that parking requirement from the CBD should be removed and the parking fund should be removed. And thank you for letting me speak.
You bet, Kathleen. Thank you. Other public comment? Hearing none. Macy, nobody else?
David Seitz here. Can you hear me?
David Seitz, you're on.
Yes, I agree with all of these proposals. This is a great plan. Where I think we'll get pushback is the residents on First and Second Street, the East First and Second Street. And one way to handle that would be just to put up a 2-hour parking there and enforce it. And the 2-hour parking, the residents would be exempt. It would just keep the all-day parkers out of residential neighborhoods. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I forgot to ask you to identify yourself, but you live in the CBD, right?
Yes, I live at 101 East 2nd Street.
Thanks so much.
Right on the corner.
Okay. Other public comment? Then I think we're approaching a wrap. Other discussion items?
Could I just make one request to Trustee Blakemore and Trustee Combs Ismail? Using the Planning Commission's map that they have outlined these different areas, 1 through 20, Could you please highlight those areas that are not residential neighborhoods? If you could locate them for me on the map, I would be very, very pleased to discuss the potential of developing parking lots not in residential neighborhoods, but frankly, I don't know where that is.
No, I agree with you, Trustee Baumhover. I didn't say not in a residential neighborhood. I said with minimal impact. So I guess the question becomes, where do we think we'll have the least impact on private residences? And it might be that there is no place that
That's just cool. Yeah, I was just going to say
wants to
for a
choose the best
future
way.
meeting, if we could all highlight what we think those are. so
Yeah,
that
right.
next time we
I'm
get
sure
this
that
discussion,
the residents of those neighborhoods will love it when we determine that they're not a residential neighborhood. But yeah,
Well, I'm not saying they're not residential. I'm saying the residential neighborhoods. I'm just saying we as a BOT should identify these spots so that those folks can get wind that we're talking about their neighborhood, and then we can, put on our shields and come take the beating.
indeed, I do think that maybe the best course of action though would be, to look at the list that the Planning Commission drew up and recommended, and then maybe prioritize it for ourselves, so that when we come to a meeting, we kind of know in our mind what we think the best way forward is.
Well, that would be my only request for the BOT members, is that we all do that, so the next time this comes before, we can debate the pros and cons of specific places that actually can be developed because they're town land.
Amen. Great. In other business, I got this nice letter from Rick Garcia, the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, that we've been awarded a grant, an IHOP grant of $37.5 for a Netherland Housing Needs Assessment. Hooray for the committee, the group that put that together. I think that's going to be extremely helpful. Affordable housing is becoming less affordable every month. Does anybody else have? And then I wanted to reiterate something that Macy has pointed out. Our reports are due on Thursday for our committee reports. Anything else that anybody wants to say, address, talk about? Then do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Macy, call the vote.
Trustee Blakemore,
Yes.
Trustee Baumhover,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahold,
Yes.
and Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yes.
Thank you.
Out by 10.
Thank you, folks.